What's going on, everyone? My name is Sebastian Stoneham, and this is my 1985 Volkswagen Vanagon that I live full-time out of. But this winter we are doing a couple little projects. I'm doing the engine build, doing some stuff with the interior. But today we're going to be focusing on the intercooler for the van, and I want to show you how I'm going to be installing an intercooler for this 1.9 TDI ALH engine into the van. I have had the ALH installed in the van. Sorry, one sec. This cat won't be quiet. Okay, go do something else and play in the snow. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to be ripping out the intercooler that I previously installed, try and rework it so it's a little bit more efficient, because on the highway, cruising on the highway like 65 miles an hour, temperatures just warm up and the intercooler gets heat locked or heat soaked. It's really hard to get those temperatures back down, not to mention going over mountain passes or just accelerating in general. It turns out when you compress air, it gets really hot really quick. We're going to be working on that today, and as you can tell, it's definitely winter now here in western Montana. The sooner I could get all these projects done, the better. So I've installed my intercooler right here behind the driver's side taillight, and it's just shoved up in this little cubby back here, and it just turns out that there's not a sufficient amount of airflow coming in from the outside vent to the intercooler, and it's not cooling it down enough. I have installed a fan on this, but even with that, it's not quite enough for what I needed to do. So I do have a plan to try and make this a little bit more efficient. I just need to take everything out and see if this is going to work. This is a tiny intercooler from a Renault R5 from, I believe, the 80s, mid 80s. I'm not sure what part of the internet I found this on, but I really liked that it had the inlet and outlet port coming out of the same side, so I didn't have to run some weird turbo boost piping all around the engine bay of the van and make unnecessary cuts through panels that I didn't really want to cut through. This is the intercooler I went with. I'll leave a link in the description to this exact intercooler. I'm not sure how much they go for or whatnot, but I did end up getting this inline bung so I could mount the, I think it's a 3-bar mass airflow sensor. I could be totally wrong, or maybe it's an air, yeah. I don't know what sensor this is. I'm going to take a couple measurements and try and mock this up so I could get some more airflow through this here Renault R5 intercooler. And this here is the fan I was running. It's a 12 volt, 80 watt. I found this on Amazon. It pushes a lot of air and pulls a lot of air too. I'm not too sure, but I didn't really have this mounted on the intercooler. It was sitting on it and it just wasn't as effective as I would have hoped. This here is the very limited amount of space I have to work with. It's a small little open box right behind the driver's side tail light, and there is a vent that runs through the rear edge of the van, and it pushes out and it's supposed to create a little bit of airflow going through the vent down this side panel and then pushing out into the engine bay for better cooling opportunities, because these vans used to come air cooled and they're very specific on the flow of air going to the engine and over those cylinder heads to keep them cool. But since this is a water-cooled van, it was a water-cooled van from the factory. I believe like later in the years, in the mid-80s, they stopped focusing on how much airflow comes down through this channel. It's not really helping us today. Right off the bat, I have a few ideas on how I could mount this intercooler, but I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the area a little bit with the grinder so I could have a better understanding of how this intercooler will fit in this little area with the fan on top of it pulling all of the air through either the original air duct, or if I have to, I will cut the bottom of this box out or the side of it. The only issue is that side of the air duct is right behind the driver's side tire, if you can see that. So any rocks or anything will be kicked up and they are hitting the wall right behind here, and the bottom of it is not any better. So if I do cut a hole on the bottom for the intercooler to be under, I will have to make some sort of shield so no rocks from the tire go up underneath that box. I don't want any holes poked into this here intercooler, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up and see what I'm working with. It turns out I'm not the best at like metal fabrication or any of that, but what I ended up doing is cutting out a couple tabs on the left and on the top of the box, and then I ended up cutting a hole, or half of a hole, down on the bottom of the box here so I could fit the intercooler and inset it in there, so it gives me a little bit more room to put the fan on top of it. And then I'll try and probably cut some holes on the outside of the van on this side so it has somewhere to pull air from, like right in the back here. So that's what I'm going to work on here and start cleaning up some of my cuts here and make it look somewhat diligent. I don't know. So I'm gonna make it look better. Actually, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is that I was able to get this this fan on the back. I was hoping to get it on the front of the intercooler here so it could pull air, but it just wasn't fitting right. And I was able to get it onto the back, mounted on with the zip tie method, and nothing is hitting, which is the good news, and everything seems to fit pretty well in there. However, the bad news is that it is pretty jammed in there because I was trying to test fit it to see how well it would fit before actually finishing up the bottom part of it. But it's I don't think this is ever coming out. Which, I mean, is good and bad, because if I just leave it in there, then I don't have to make any mounts for it, which I wouldn't be too mad about. It's not the best job. It's going to be better than it was before. I'm just going to leave it in there and put some, some of that reflective tape, the aluminum tape all around the edges here, to try and create a duct so it is pulling air from outside. I am actually going to drill some holes right here so it could pull air from right here instead of having to pull air from all the way up there. Can get this intercooler out, then I'll put some mesh behind there so it looks a little bit more professional, but that's kind of the plan right now. And I'm just trying to get my intake temperatures lower than they are, because I don't really like when my intake temperatures creep up to what my coolant temperatures are reading. And where it's sitting right now is pretty close to how it was sitting. It's just inset a little bit more, so my intercooler piping should fit pretty well without having to too much around, so I won't have to deal with all of that once this engine does go back in, because it's getting cold out here and I want this engine in within the week. I've been trying to work on this thing, getting the head sorted out, and I finally am on the right track with that. I am going to be checking the valves and seeing which valves are good and which valves are bad, so I could order the necessary parts and get that all wrapped up. Hopefully I could get all of that done, and then all of the pulleys with the timing belt all on the engine by the next couple of days. So I'm gonna wrap this video up here. I just wanted to get this in place and have a good idea of what I'm working with. Oh yeah, and I checked this clearance, and the tail light still fits in there, which is very nice. I just need to go ahead and wire this up and try and cover all of the gaps that are in there, and it should be rolling down the road with a little bit colder intake temps. Well, I know this video wasn't too informational, but it was just showing what I'm doing to somewhat install this intercooler into my 1985 Volkswagen Vanagon. It's definitely not the best install. I think the right thing to do if you're going to be running a TDI engine or any turbo engine in a Volkswagen Vanagon is to go air to water. That might seem a little bit extreme if you're familiar to turbochargers, but since the engine is in the back, there's just no good way to cool that air. I mean, you see what I'm doing here just to try and get my intake temps a couple degrees cooler than what they usually run at. Like typically they're around 150, I would say. Middle of summer, cruising on the highway, they're at like 150. But if I want to speed up or anything or going up a hill, then they shoot up to like 180, 190, 200 Fahrenheit even. I've seen it. I think the highest it's gotten was like 210. And luckily I do have the head off of my engine and I don't see any melted pistons because the EGTs have been pretty consistent in their happy spot. I think it's, I don't even know, but the EGTs are good and they haven't spiked or anything at any point of me running this TDI engine inside of my Volkswagen Vanagon. So I'm going to wrap this up and stay tuned for the next video. I'll be testing the valves and seeing if I need some valve guides or not, and hopefully get this engine to a better point so I can start wrapping it up and then throw it back in the van here. I'd like to invite you to hit the like button if you liked this style of content, and if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button with the little bell notification so you could be notified whenever I post a video. I'm going to be pumping out a lot of videos here in December as I'm wrapping up the engine build for this Vanagon, and then I'm going to start on a couple other projects on the interior and a little bit on the exterior. Stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in a couple days.